murder he always maintained he did not commit. When 12-year-old Darlene Tiffany Moore was killed by gang crossfire in Roxbury back in '88, he told police that he was blocks away with friends. But he was convicted anyway based on witness testimony and spent nearly 15 years of his life in prison. Then in 2003, he learned in Boston Globe reports that witnesses said police had bullied them into testifying against them, including one man who later recanted his statements, telling the Globe police fed him details about the murder, none of which were disclosed to his defense. Shawn was released later that year at age 39 after an appellate court judge threw out his conviction and prosecutors declined to retry his case. A year after that, he filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the officer behind the recanted testimony and ultimately won a $14 million judgment from the city of Boston. Then the city fought back hard and convinced the judge to declare a mistrial in the first civil rights case. Ultimately, in 2014, prosecutors agreed to a $5 million settlement. Of course, no amount of money can erase having 14 plus years of your life stolen from you and a criminal record casting a shadow over your life long after. And after years of health issues, Shawn Drumgold died last Monday, reportedly after suffering an aortic aneurysm at age 57. I'm joined by the defense attorney who fought to get Shawn's conviction overturned, Rosemary Scapicchio. She's also obviously fought for against wrongful convictions of many others, including Shawn Ellis, who after 22 years was released. His case was documented in the Netflix documentary Trial 4. Rosemary, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So can you remind people, flesh out a little bit of what I say, why was Shawn's conviction overturned? What misconduct ultimately was brought to the attention of the court?
Because two Boston police officers, and I think there was more than two, but we proved two, paid a witness to say that he saw Shawn right before the murder, that Shawn talked to him about going in the direction that the murder was supposed to be, and that Shawn talked to him about having guns that were hot after the homicide. And he was an individual that at trial, the defense attorneys had no explanation for. And it turns out, we found out 15 years later that the police paid him and fed him the details of the crime so that he could testify. He never saw Shawn. Shawn never had a conversation with him. But they had him testify to that effect so that they could put him away for life for a crime he didn't commit.
Well, also, wasn't there a prosecutorial witness for the prosecution who ultimately the prosecution failed to disclose to you that that in fact she had, I believe, I'm not sure, brain cancer and was impaired? That was information that needed to be provided to the defense that was not as well, correct?
Yes. So Mary Alexander was a witness who claimed she looked out the window while the jury was on a view and Shawn was there. And she claimed she recognized Shawn as a person she saw that night. We found out later that the police had been to her house many times, that she had been suffering from brain cancer, that her mom had told the police that she has no memory, that she has no ability to help them out in any way, and they failed to disclose all of that information to us.
When Shawn did finally get out, thanks to the Globe reporting and your incredible work, where did he live?
Well, when he first got out, he was homeless. And so Shawn had a very different experience. Shawn Drumgold had a very different experience than Shawn Ellis, because when Shawn Drumgold got out, there was no exoneree network. And so when he got out, he couldn't stay with his family because he had a felony conviction. He couldn't stay with his mother, who was in public housing, because he had a murder conviction on his record. He couldn't stay with his wife and his daughter, again, because they were living in a place where they couldn't have anyone living there with a felony conviction. So he was homeless.
And
he was couch surfing for a long time.
How was Shawn Drumgold's health when he got out of prison?
Well, I think anyone who gets out of prison after 15 years, especially back then, there's no regular doctor who sees you for a physical back when Shawn Drumgold was serving time. And so he hadn't really had a regular physical. He hadn't had regular dental care. He hadn't had anyone checking on his cholesterol, on his diabetes, any of those types of things. So that when you get out and you haven't had those things checked for 15 years, clearly you're going to have some issues. And so, you know, he did well, I think, out there while he was out there. But he spent 15 years in a place where he got virtually no health care whatsoever.
And Rosemary, obviously, when police misconduct is found by a court, I'm assuming there are a bunch of police officers who are not terribly happy with the person whose conviction was overturned. Did the police target him at all once he was a free man?
I think they I think they still believe to this day that he committed the crime, which is ridiculous. But I also believe that once he filed the civil suit, that they absolutely targeted him.
How so?
They stopped him they stopped him on a number of occasions. They charged him with some crimes that he didn't commit. We went to trial at least twice and got not guilty verdicts as a result of them charging him with crimes that he didn't commit. They wanted him to become something that he wasn't, so that his case would be less valuable to a federal jury.
And, you know, I, as I've said to you many a time, I can't imagine how someone survives 15 years or longer in jail for a crime that he didn't commit. I also can't imagine once you're finally freed that you have to live homeless with inadequate health care, being targeted by the same cops who are responsible for you going to jail for 15 years. How did Shawn Drumgold deal with all this once he got out?
Well, you know, I think he was very, very much supported by his family, but they were people of very limited means in terms of finances. So it wasn't like they could put him up in a hotel room. It wasn't like they could get an apartment for him. They were barely scraping by as it was. And so the limited resources that his wife and his mother and his family had at the time just weren't enough to set him up in a situation where he could be successful.
And just to be clear, correct me if I'm wrong, my math is wrong. For those who hear the $5 million figure that I mentioned a minute ago, and I should mention Nancy Gertner, a frequent guest on this show when she was a federal district court judge, presided over this case. It was either 10 or 11 years after his release that this settlement was finally reached. Am I not correct about that?
It was actually almost 12 years after the settlement was reached. So they fought us for 10 years. The city of Boston fought us. The state of Massachusetts fought us. So we filed for compensation both under the Massachusetts innocence statute, and we filed a 1983 claim in federal court. And we tried the case the first time around to a hung jury. And there were a number of appeals as to whether or not there could be a second trial. We tried the second trial in front of Judge Gertner again, where we got a $14 million jury verdict. Right. They appealed that again. And the whole time, Shawn is still trying to keep his family together. He's trying to keep himself together. But he's now 10 or 11 years out of jail, still without any compensation for the 15 years and 2 months that they stole from him.
It's unimaginable. On a bright note, I guess, and obviously it doesn't come in time for Shawn Drumgold, but your other client, the other Shawn Ellis, has been involved in this exoneree network. And I hear in this House budget, the Beacon Hill budget, $250,000 is appropriate. Not a huge amount, but at least the start through the Innocence Project that will fund what kind of work that they're trying to do.
Well, Shawn Ellis, together with Ray Champagne and Victor Rosario, started something called the Exoneree Network. Mm-hmm. What the Exoneree Network does is to try to provide a support system, a system of empowerment for people who are released after having served wrongful convictions. So the members of the Exoneree Network volunteer to go pick these people up if they don't have any family members. They give them a gift card to try to get toiletries, to try to get some clothing that doesn't say DOC on it. Just to try to give them, a little bit of money to get some food. They try to get them a cell phone because most of them don't know how to use a cell phone. And very often they try to give them either a computer or access to a computer so they can try and find a job. And so that's sort of the physical aspect of the Exoneree Network. What I think is more important is the emotional aspect of the program, where these men and women meet at least once a week in a circle where they try to discuss what's happening with them. But more than that, they provide emotional support for each other, so that if you are having that dark day about all the time that was stolen from you, you could, text or call one of these guys at 3 a.m. and they will come get you. They'll take you for a cup of coffee. They'll take you for a ride. They'll walk you through it because they've experienced what you have experienced. And I think that makes a huge difference in terms of what's happening. So instead of being stuck in that dark, dreary place,
I understand.
They find a path forward and they find it together. And I think that's so important.
It's unbelievable. The state wrongly puts you behind bars, takes 15 years of your life, is forced to let you be free, and then you're not really free thanks to the complete inattention of the state that's responsible for. In any case, before you go, when you and Shawn Ellis were with me after he was released, you talked about the fact that, you know, occasionally, thanks to incredible work of the Innocence Project, people like you, great reporters, individual injustices are righted. But I think what you said after the Shawn Ellis thing is that every case that the dirty prosecutor or cop in this case was involved in should be looked at, rather than it being incumbent on that individual to reach out to the state. One, did I get you right? And two, is any of that being done anywhere?
Yes, you absolutely did get it right. It's a systemic problem within the criminal justice system. And two, nothing is being done. Nobody is looking at these cases in any systemic way to say, wait a minute, if this police officer lied in the Drumgold case, maybe he lied in another case. If he lied in the Ellis case, if he lied in the Rosario case, if he lied in the, in any of these cases, maybe there is some need to look at it on a systemic basis, but it's not happening. The programs right now that are post-conviction integrity programs, they're either not being funded correctly or they're not caring to do the investigation that needs to happen to be able to address this problem on a more global way.
Rosemary Scapicchio, I only have 30 seconds left. Can you spend those seconds telling us a little bit about what kind of person Shawn Drumgold was?
Shawn was a family man. He loved his family. He loved spending time with them. He loved spending time with his friends. He had a lot of friends in the neighborhood. He had, very close friends that supported him for a period of time after he was released. And I think more than anything, Shawn could have benefited from the exoneree network, which I'm so sad that he didn't get the opportunity to do. And I'm hopeful that even though this $250,000 grant was given, it's a great start, but there needs to be so much more. There needs to be housing in some sort of housing purchase for these people when they get out, because right now there's nowhere for them to go. And they either go into, some sort of drug treatment halfway house, which is a disaster, if you ask me, or they're homeless and they're couch surfing. And that's not fair. That's not the right way to treat these people who have been wrongfully convicted, who have been exonerated by the court system, and who have been forgotten by the state of Massachusetts.
I couldn't agree with every word more. Rosemary, thanks so much for your work and your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.